council. And we want to turn it over to our staff, so they can lead us through this discussion.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, and I apologize for making you late for your meeting. Today we have a full agenda for the council work session. So first we're gonna have a quarterly financial report, and that will be presented by Ms. Cindy West, our Director of Finance. And then we're gonna have our public safety report. Chief Tim Graham will give the fire department report, and then Chief Mike Broadhead will give the police department report. And Mayor, members of the council, then we need to talk about utility billing and bill pay. And this is going to be an interesting conversation, but it's something we need to share with y'all because we need to make an adjustment on our utility bills. But before we do that, we need to share with y'all so before the public knows. It's not, and I'll just say right up front, it is not a bill, an increase on the bill, but you'll see when we start presenting it, we've got our billing right now is based on a manual system. However, when we get into it, you'll see that the delay in folks getting their bills really should not occur, so we need to catch our bills up. And so we're going to share with you a way that we can do that with the least impact on our utility customers. It's a manual system, and today we have an electronic system. We have automated meter reading, and for this system goes back 30-some years the way we're doing our billing. And so we got to come out of the 20th century and get into the 21st century. And so that's the discussion we'll have with you. And then we also want to talk about how bill pay, we've got to get that into the 21st century as well. So Ms. Cindy will talk about how that will happen. Then on an annual basis, we have the presentation of our 2023 financial audit report, and Richard Gill will be here to present that to you. And then you you asked us to work on a policy ordinance amendment for personnel mobility ordinance. And so Caleb Rassico with TSW is here today to make a presentation to you, and if y'all are okay, then we'll move forward with drafting the ordinance, and that will come back to you at a later date. And then last time we had a work session, we talked about proximity waivers in our downtown area, and we told you we would come back. And so today we want to talk in more detail and sort of clearly identify the areas that we're talking about proximity waivers in our downtown area, the central business district, but not the full district, but those districts that are more business in character. And then Olympia Games is going to come and talk about tree grants. We have some funds that we get as a part of a mitigation program. I think it was our stormwater, and so we have some funds available. And I know the bar has been very interested in possibly helping encourage people to plant more trees. And so we have a proposal to share with you and see if we get your support to move forward with that. And then the last item we have on the agenda, we're going to save this one. I think it was 2 weeks ago, we sent 6 of our members of our youth council to Atlanta to meet with other youth councils from across the state. And we thought it'd be great for our youth council members to come and share with the council about their experience. So the last presentation was the members of the Statesboro Youth Council that attended that meeting to come and share with us. And so after that, that will conclude our work session. And so we may just make an adjustment. This deal may get here probably about 4 o'clock or so. So if he's not here, we'll just continue on until this bill comes, because then he's going to have to remain for the open session. So with that, I'm gonna call on Ms. Cindy to present the quarterly financial report.
Good afternoon. So, the general fund for the first 2 quarters of fiscal year 2024 is showing an increase over the prior year, 2023, first fiscal year 2023, second quarter. That's mainly due to the fact that we did have a millage rate increase, so the majority of the taxes will have come in by December. Also, we have seen an increase in some of our franchise fees. The license and permits that we have issued and investment income is higher in the first 2 quarters of FY 2024 versus last year, FY 2023. In our general fund expenditures, we do see an increase there. That is due to our personnel costs as well as purchase contract services increased, and we did have an increase in our transfer to fire that we had budgeted at the first of the year. So that is why you see that the increases are higher than this time last year. So we are at 52% of our budget. In the first 2 quarters, we would normally be at 50%, so we're tracking good on that. For the Statesboro Fire Service Fund revenues, we have seen there's a higher revenue than last year. That is due to the transfer in. We should be receiving the fire fee for the 5 Mile District this quarter, so that'll show up in the next quarterly report. The Fire Service Fund, you do see an increase in the expenditures there, and that is due to we have increased personnel, and so the personnel costs have increased with that, as well as general operating costs. In the Water and Sewer Fund revenues, we had a rate increase at the beginning of July. That was due to the meter size, and so that is reflected in the revenues, as well as an increase in ATC fees. So we increased our rate there, and we had the construction. With the Water and Sewer Fund expenditures, it's very close to where it was last year, just a little bit increase. That's due to personnel and general operating costs. Parts and supplies cost more than they did, but we are continuing to see those costs increase. The Stormwater Fund revenues, the increase here compared to last year is due to the GFA grant that we drew down some money on, as well as the stream restoration grant that we had this year that we did not have last year. With our Stormwater Fund expenditures, they're pretty flat. They're where they were last year this time for the second quarter. Natural Gas Fund revenues, and this one looks odd because you do see such a large decrease, but we only charge gas rates based on what we're being charged. So the price of gas decreased from where it was last quarter, and you will also see that reflected in the expenditure slide where we haven't spent as much compared to last year.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, y'all fix that gas leaking better? I figured it was, I just heard it was.
We did, this has been repaired and everything's back on.
I figured you would. All I got was, it was broke, not that it was fixed. That's okay.
So here on the natural gas expenditure slide, you'll see that the expenditures are a lot less than they were this time last year, and that correlates with the revenue slide being down. With the Solid Waste Collection Fund, we see an increase in revenues. We did have a rate increase at the 1st of July in our Solid Waste Collection Fund. We've collected 50% of what we budgeted. With our Solid Waste Collection Fund expenditures, there's not much difference from last year, and we're at 54% of what we have spent, 46% of what we have budgeted. Our Solid Waste Disposal Fund revenues, again, we had a rate increase in July, and we have caught up with our transfers in from SPLOST for air rights to time last year, in 2023. Our solid waste disposal fund expenditures, relatively flat, not much difference. We spent 44% of our budget. Next is the SPOS report. This is just based on the distribution report that we get from the state. And you can see there's been a slight decrease, but the same trend is continued from last year to this year. We're still higher than we were in fiscal year 2023, so that's the good news. And our T-SPOS follows the same kind of trend that our 2019 SPOS does. With our hotel motel revenue, we saw a dip in December. We're still overall collected more than we did from the period July 2022 to December 22. That was $656,000. From July 23 to December 23, we collected $707,000. Anybody have any questions?
Council, any questions?
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Look at this, trending in the right direction. And we like that. So we want to call Chief Tim Graham.
No, this is the moment I kind of wish Phil was here. How many total motels and hotels do we have inside of the city? Do we know that number? Can somebody at some point just get that to me? Okay.
You want all of them?
Yeah.
All these in styles?
Yeah, we want all of them. See what we got going on. Okay.
Good afternoon. 2023 was busy and productive for the Statesboro Fire Department. Some brief accomplishment bullet points. We were very busy in hiring, recruitment, utilizing an aggressive recruitment strategy. We were able to fill 21 positions. Got outside of the box using television commercials and some different things. Very, very beneficial, and that was a huge success for us to fill that many positions in such a short period of time.
Filled all 21 and, all in 23. Very good.
We completed renovations to Fire Station 2. That was mainly to the living quarters. Just made it a little bit more efficient as a fire station. We received 2 new state-of-the-art Pierce fire engines. We expanded the department's health and wellness program to include a peer fitness program as well as a behavioral health initiative. I want to take just a moment and make sure that I brag on this program just a little bit. We have a strong partnership with Georgia Southern, and our health and wellness program is really setting the standard in this area. We've had numerous departments reach out and are looking to copy what we're trying to do. The last component is the behavioral health and mental health. 20 to 30% of all firefighters are going to experience some sort of PTSD throughout their career versus 6.8% of the general population in their lifetime. So, that's the last key piece that we're trying to get implemented, but, that is one of the, prides of the department is the health and wellness program that we have within the department. We received a little over $2.1 million in grant funding, which is exceptional and certainly helped with the cost. Just general overview, the operations, we ran 1,474 total calls of service. 69% of those were inside the city limits, 27 were in the fire district, and 4% were outside, either in Bullitt County. I don't think we had any outside the county mutual aid calls last year. Our average response time is up about 5 seconds, which is 6 minutes and 9 seconds. Our average on scene time is about 21 minutes. 287 calls overlapping, 19%. That number is starting to creep up and something that we're keeping a close eye on. And we conducted 52 investigations with the police department. Over the past few years, we've, as we've already mentioned, the 21 positions, 9 were improved in FY '22, and then the 12 that were awarded through the FEMA Safer Grant. These additional firefighters are now allowing us to be in step with NFPA standards. We are fixing to raise the minimum staffing. Currently it is 12, we're gonna go to 17, which will give us NFPA numbers at all times, 24/7, 365. That's gonna put 4 firefighters on every apparatus, as well as a battalion chief or a commanding officer to manage the scenes. Just some additional tangible information of the impact directly on the service delivery. One apparatus, we now achieve the 2 in and 2 out, which is required for us to maintain and have before we can initiate interior suppression operations. And then, according to the National Institute of Standards and Technology, did some studies on crew efficiencies based on the number. 4-person crews completed the same number of fireground tasks 25% faster than a 3-person crew. Time to water on the fire, meaning the time that the fire started to the time that we're able to start putting water on it, improved by 6%. Again, these are all 4 versus 3 person companies. And our ground ladder deployment for rescues, ventilation operations was 25% more efficient. So there's a tangible benefit to having those additional firefighters on the apparatus. Just a very basic breakdown of our calls of service by type. We had 192 fires. Again, our biggest, I'm not gonna go through each of them, but obviously the biggest slice of that pie is our false alarms. Again, those are not always malicious, but again, I anticipate those numbers to maintain, because again, the more systems that we put online as we grow, you're just gonna have those malfunctions and things of that nature. So that's pretty similar to the numbers as they were last year. Nothing significant changing.
So those aren't necessarily businesses who have oversensitive signal and,
They could be. I mean, that's everything from, somebody thinking it's funny and pulling a pull station to the system malfunctioning, so.
Thunderstorm.
Oh, thunderstorm, I'm sorry.
Can't stop that.
We've actually seen an improvement in the ones that are, it used to be that every fire alarm in the city went off when a thunderstorm came through. Yeah, we ran a ton of calls, but, again, I guess the infrastructure's improved enough where we're not receiving quite as many of those type of false alarms.
But you expect to still see a high percentage of
I do,
false calls.
just based on, again, with Georgia Southern, the student population in the community, yeah, I don't expect that ever to be, in the 20s. I always feel like it'll be, could it be better? Absolutely. 35% would probably be the target on that.
What would be considered a special incident?
Anything that we couldn't put into one of the other categories.
Get cat out of the tree.
We do not rescue cats out of trees for a lot of different reasons. Believe it or not, there's been quite a few significant injuries to firefighters in the service by trying to rescue cats out of trees. Chief Duggar actually received numerous stitches when he was working in Charleston. The cat didn't want to come down out of the tree. This slide is what we call a heat map. It just basically shows you kind of where our highest demand is. As you can see, as we would expect, this southern part of the city and the fire district. Again, this is total calls of service. While it's not as drastic, you can also see on this map, these are just the building fires. It's a little bit more evenly dispersed, but still this southern end. And again, I bring this to the point because as we've had conversations, we're in need of additional fire stations, and this is going to be the area, the south end is really where the highest need is going to be. Our incidents by location, again, this is just a breakdown of the calls that we run in the city versus district and outside of fire district. We've had about a 15% increase from last year in total calls of service. This graph is new, I didn't include it last year, but this is a breakdown by council district, just so that you can have an individual glance into how often the fire service in your district is being delivered.
Shouldn't put that there. All that shaking our head.
That's not necessarily a bad thing, because remember now, a call of service, when we say total call of service, that's everything from assist, yep, a smoke detector install, a class, fire safety talk, community event, things of that nature, anything that is requested by the fire department. It's not just, emergency incidents.
This does mean that District 4-1, right?
However you want to.
District 4.
National average of fire-related property loss is roughly 31%. The Statesboro Fire Department is at just under 8%, which is exceptional. Basically, what that means is where's your pre-incident value, how much of it did you lose, and how much of it did you save? We do a really good job of preserving the property. And that has a direct impact on the local economy. Again, I'm sure all of you are aware of the statistics when it comes to businesses and things that experience a fire and not reopening and things of that nature. Training division, our folks completed just under 20,000 hours of training in 2023. The breakdown you see there is the ISO category. So when we get an evaluation, those are the categories that they look. The first column there is the required hours that we must do. The average is basically what we're achieving internally, and then the totals of hours there on the far right. Prevention, fire inspections and compliance. So this graph is basically just showing the workload of our prevention division based on what their heaviest activities are. Again, the two biggest things being the annual inspections as well as other, which is consultations, complaints, fireworks stands, anything that's not really included in one of those other categories listed. Community risk reduction. So what community risk reduction is, this is also an area that's evaluated by ISO. It's fairly new. We did undergo this section in our last evaluation. It's additional points, so it really helps departments that are proactive in their risk reduction in the community. We had direct interactions with nearly 2,000 citizens over 2023, installed 300 smoke alarms in 230 residents. And then we held 2 smoke alarm blitzes in partnership with American Red Cross. One of them was a mobile home blitz, because those are high hazard for us, and that was conducted both in mobile home areas, both in the city and the fire district. And then the second one was in the South Main, West Grady, Vista Circle area. Those are very productive and really appreciated by the neighborhoods that we're able to visit, and plan on continuing to do at least 2.
What's a blitz? Ride down the street and knock on doors?
That's basically it. Yep. We try to push out ahead of the time, make them aware that we're going to be out, and then we go door to door. Sure do.
And it's free.
Mm-hmm.
And it's free.
And it is free. Yep. Community outreach, again, we try to stay very active in the community, everything from the farmers market to the fair. We partnered with the therapy spot, assembling AMBUC's mobility bikes for special needs children. So our Assistant Chief Jason Baker kind of was spearheaded this program, but the therapy spot has children that obviously have some mobility restrictions, and they make special bikes, but the problem was they didn't have anybody to assemble those bikes. So that's a project that the fire department has taken on to help put those together and present them to the children, and that's been an awesome experience as well.
Thank y'all for that. That's pretty
Absolutely.
much removing it.
It's been fun for, just as much fun for the firemen as it has been for them, I promise you. The Up in Flames, this was something that we've done in the past, but we had taken it kind of fell off the radar. When COVID came around, we were able to get it kicked back up, and it was a great, turnout, and we expect it to be even bigger and better next year. Just a couple of things I wanted to mention moving forward. So again, I'm gonna bring up the additional fire stations continue to be a priority. They're only gonna be, that's only going to increase as we grow. We do anticipate an ISO evaluation within the next 2 years. It's time. They typically come around 3 to 5 years. It's been 5 years. So we feel like that's gonna be coming within the next couple of years. Unfortunately, we're gonna be moving to a new reporting and data management system. This is gonna be our third in the last 4 years, and unfortunately, it's outside of our control, but the current one has been bought up by a bigger company, and does not look like they're going to be able to meet our needs, so we're gonna again make a transition, so it is what it is. And then one of the other things is that we are anticipating, as with the growth in the construction and so much that's going on, we feel like the technical rescue capabilities need to be enhanced, so we're gonna start working on that as well. Any questions?
What's technical rescue?
So that would be anything such as high angle, trench collapse, structural collapse, anything that, basically when you think of, the USAR teams that go and, after a disaster, it's that type of training.
Yeah.
It's very, very extensive. I think there's 7 disciplines, that they have to get training in. Obviously, we're not gonna be able to, we will not have a full functioning USAR team. Our goal is basically to be able to bridge the gap between the incident and being able to get the coastal task force of GSAR out of Savannah to get here and help us. So basically to stabilize and, maintain the incident, not let it get any worse.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Mayor,
Council. My presentation this year is relatively short, but I do have a little video at the end I'd like to watch, but I'll set it as we head back here. First thing I'd like to talk about, as you know, we really emphasize training in our police department, and I would say that of all the things that we do this better than anybody in the region and even perhaps in the state. We've really made a commitment to this. You can see about 14,000 plus hours of total training. What I'm most proud of is our sworn officer average is almost 183 hours last year, and the state requirement's 20 hours. So we're well above that, and we continue to make that commitment. Calls for service, last year we handled a little over 43,000 calls for service. Citations were up, warnings were up, crashes were down, and arrests were up. One reason why I'm particularly proud of the fact that citations, arrests, it's not that it's just all about enforcement, but we spent most of last year between 25 and 30% short on staffing operationally. So I'm really happy to report that today things are looking better. We were at one point last year 18 positions short, meaning they're on the injured reserve right now.
Okay.
So the numbers are just gonna get better. We're seeing a lot more applicants and a lot more better applicants.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna turn that around. But like we talked about before, we didn't get into it overnight. It took us about 3 years of digging that hole, and it's gonna take us a while to get back. But it won't take 3 years to get back.
Okay.
And we're well on our way. So, any questions about that?
So would I be premature to say, but in the next 2 months, we'll be ready to go?
That's premature, Mayor.
Okay.
But the news is good, right? Our two
It
people on the
is.
injured reserve.
Yeah.
One will be back at the end of February, one will be back in the middle of March. That gives us 2 more, right? The people at the academy will graduate about the end of March, enter field training, they'll be out on their own mid to late summer. The 4 at the academy, at least 4 in the April academy, by next fall will be out of the room. So those numbers are improving. And we hope the new pay package that y'all are putting together is really gonna help us retain the people that we have, so they don't feel like they need to go someplace else, and we need to start turning that equation around. Traffic crashes last year, you know, you can see the top 5 locations. All of them are along the bypass. It's just a product of more traffic at higher speed is gonna result in more crashes. So it's just been a fairly consistent statistic. The actual intersection may change, but the top 5 locations tend to always be right along the bypass. Here's some crime statistics. I know we like to talk about this. Remember last year, our aggravated assaults just fell off the table for some reason. Between August and December, we didn't have any felony violent, crimes. And we don't have a good explanation for that. Honestly, I wish we could take credit for it. It's just one of those things that happened. About December, we started kind of going back to normal. And you can see for the overall year, we were at 61 aggravated assaults and batteries. Here's why this number is not as bad as, like it's sort of a straight line for the last 5 or 6 years. But our population hasn't remained the same the last 5 or 6 years. Mayor, I think I heard you say at a town hall that when you came into office, we were what, 36th largest in the state?
We was number 37 in the state, and now we're number 28.
Yeah, so with that population growth, there's going to be more people in a smaller space, and it's just going to result in crime for some people. Homicides, remember in 2020 we had a real bad year, and I said that I didn't think that was our new normal, and we're back down to about 3 to 4 per year, which we'd love that to be 0, but we haven't been at 0 for quite some time. We saw a little uptick in robberies, but again, we've been seeing a decline for 3 or 4 or 5 years. What we had last year at one point was we had a number of people doing pizza rip-offs, right? They would order a pizza to a parking lot, guy would show up with the pizzas, they would snatch them and run, and we had to count that as a robbery, right? We are typically not seeing like convenience store stick-ups. That's just not the kind of robberies we have. Most of our robberies that are violent are drug-related rip-offs, people stealing people's drugs and guns. You see a rapist has taken a low dive, which is great, except that we know that those are reported rapes, and that probably 90% of legitimate rapes are not reported to us. And so that number is going to vary year by year based upon, particularly if GSU is doing some good outreach and education on reporting, we'll see an uptick in reporting. So we know that those assaults are happening, but there's not a lot that we can do about that.
Chief, let me ask you that, as far as our social infrastructure, as far as young ladies feeling safe to report these, is that social infrastructure where it needs to be, or is it some type of gap that we're missing? Because that is a big drop off, and so ideally I would love to think that that's where we are, but I just want to make sure our young ladies have the mechanism in place to feel safe to report.
I think that's something that we need to investigate from new victim impact surveys and find out if people who are being victims of that feel safe to report, rather than me say, well, I think it's great, right? Yeah. We have the Teal House, they're a great partner with us. They do a fantastic job working with victims. One thing that we're seeing that might be attributable to the decline is that the law changed a few years ago where women, particularly if they're the victims of a sexual assault, they can go get a sexual assault kit done, meaning the evidence can be collected, but they don't have to report it to the police. And so that allows them to preserve that evidence, and it gives them the power, puts them in the driver's seat to decide if they ever want to report that and how to prosecute it. And so I think that's a piece of that comfort. They can go get the evidence, but they don't necessarily have to make a police report. And so if that's happening, then we might be just getting less reports. The other thing about the ag assault number, that ag battery, that includes when people fire guns in the general direction of other people. And you might recall last spring we had a tremendous problem at Morris Heights. We had a number of shots fired over there, and all of those get counted as ag assault cases. If somebody shoots in the general direction of 4 or 5 people, we count that as 4 or 5 ag assaults. And so once that calmed down, we saw that number sort of return to normal, but it would definitely help the numbers spike last year a little bit. Property crimes, there's just a couple on here for your perusal. Theft and burglary. You see theft has been somewhat of a downward climb, traveling downward for maybe the last decade, and burglary continues to march downward, and I'm pretty happy with that. Again, most of our burglaries tend to be roommate burglaries. Somebody goes home for Christmas, they come back, and one of the roommates has kicked their door and stole their PlayStation. Roadway assist, this is something I want to talk about for just a minute. Last summer, we embarked on a program using interns where we put them in a work truck, and we had them help officers at crash scenes. We had them respond to private property crashes to help people exchange information officially. and they also were out helping people if they ran out of gas, needed a tire fixed, just to keep officers from having to go on those kind of calls and try to free some officer time up. Last year, they handled 265 calls, and that was just a couple of guys working part-time when they could around school. I think it's been tremendously successful, and I think that as the future goes on, something we might want to talk about, making that more of a permanent position, because I think there's a lot of utility in that and helping save officer time.
But, how do you get in touch with these guys? Is 911?
You dispatch us, sir, and dispatchers can dispatch them.
And who are the guys again?
Would not be known.
Yeah, so generally how that would happen is if someone would call 911,
911,
and they would say, hey, on the bypass, I ran out of gas.
Well, that's the,
Yeah, they would come to us, they would call us,
764-991.
instead of sending an officer, we'd send roadway assistance.
and who are these guys? You say they're
College interns.
college interns wanting to be,
One of them has applied for employment, and the other one, has gone back to get his master's degree, so.
Okay.
We're hoping it'll also be a recruiting tool, at least in 50% of cases so far that's happened, but we'll just kind of see.
Wait, so I was unclear on how do you get in contact? Do you dial 911?
It's exactly the same as calling for a police officer, because they're not on full time, so
Okay.
if they're not on, we'll send an officer, but if they are on, then they'll get the call first, right? Another way that they handle a lot of calls is that officers will request them at the scene, so picture a traffic crash, we have an officer who's using his car to block traffic, and then they're working with the drivers to exchange or get the information they need, but they need someone else to direct traffic. So then we've been pulling an officer out of service to go to that crash scene to direct traffic. When roadway assist is on, the officers can call for them and they can come and direct traffic, rather than taking an officer out of rotation.
That's good.
So how many hours are
We've really given them a lot of flexibility to come when they can around their class schedules, and so they tend to work 20 to 30 hours a week each. If they happen to overlap, we put them in the truck together, and if not, then we get a little bit better coverage. So it really has been, again, it's really been just a pilot project. In order to have that be a full-time service, we'd have to hire full-time employees to do that.
So, when you get calls for like, incidents, whatever the incident is, do the calls vary based upon the season? Like in summertime, you get more calls, in wintertime, or the calls drop?
Yeah, really good question. We're such a university town that drives our calls for service is the population of the university. So in the summertime, we actually see a decrease in calls because a lot of people are out of town and not here. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I would say that Southern students are not really involved in much crime, but they drive a lot of calls for service, right?
Yeah.
Most of what we do is not crime related. They have calls because somebody broke into their car, they tried to lock their car, somebody took something out of it, they lose a wallet, they lose their ID card. Those are all calls for service the officers are handling. So they really do drive that because that's a pretty big population.
So, are the permanent residents of Statesboro pushing crime levels, or is it students or individuals just coming into the city for a night or so?
Honestly, about 4 years ago, we tried to figure that out by address, and it was mostly local people committing problems, that particularly crime-related problems, as opposed to just calls for service. And that's happening all over town. I mean, it's not, I wish I could say it was in this one neighborhood. It's sporadic in neighborhoods, but it literally is spread out all over town. We handle calls for service all over the city. We have violent crime all over the city. I think of our 4 homicides in 2023, I think they were in 3 different council districts. So it is pretty widespread. But we have a very transit population. People are mobile, they're driving around. If you go in the mornings and watch the amount of traffic driving into Scranton County, or the amount of people coming into town from Brooklyn, it is a steady line of traffic. Like, people are commuting into Statesboro, and that really swells our daytime population. And that's why we end up handling a lot of traffic crashes, because there's just a lot of people driving around. And as our population increases, then we're just gonna see more and more of that being driven.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think we have a residential population that's in and around 33,438, something like that. But our working population is like close to 50,000 or something like that. So we have a lot of people that come in, and actually work, in our community. So we have to think about that. Our population is one thing, but our roads get used as if it's a much bigger city. So we have to be, astutely aware of that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Help me understand the difference in self-initiated and calls for service.
So a self-initiated would be, like the roadway assist guy or a police officer driving down the street, they see somebody broken down, they would just stop and say, hey, you need some help, and they'd be like, oh yeah, look, I'm hired for that, they'd help them with the fire. As opposed to somebody calling 911 and say, hey, can somebody come help me?
And Chief, I'm looking at the data, and I'm gonna ask you a speculatory question. Of the crimes that we're seeing, if you had to say what percentage of these crimes you think are youth driven? Individuals 18 and below, whether it's the property crimes, violent crimes, if you had to pick a number, if you had to guesstimate what that rate would be, what would you say that is?
I'd say 70%.
About 70%?
Yeah, these cars that are being, probably our number one crime is people, I say breaking into, but unlawfully entering other people's cars. And so we have juveniles that are wandering parking lots at night. As you know, we have big parking lots in these apartment complexes. People will wander through, check every door handle, and just get into the ones that are unlocked. I think I presented a slide to you guys about 2 or 3 years ago about how many guns we lose in unlocked cars, and it's still 40 or 50 a year. Those guns are getting out of circulation, and we could prevent a lot of that.
And I do want to be clear on this, because I don't want to, I'm going to get asked this in a town hall or something along this line, and I want to be prepared. Are you saying 70% of all crimes, violent crimes, property crimes, what are you saying that 70% is driving?
I think if we were to say, if we could say 21 or less, as opposed to just juvenile, then I would say 7% of all of our crimes are being committed by people less than 21 years old.
Okay.
So we do find people in their 30s, particularly more domestic violence kind of crimes that are committing crimes. People tend to age out of the criminal justice system, generally speaking, after 35 or so. But it's our entry level folks that are committing a lot of problems. I think last week we had a couple of stolen cars, and it turned out to be 3 teenagers who were doing TikTok challenges where they were stealing Kias and Hyundais, and they weren't taking them anywhere. When we talked to them, we thought, we want to make sure it's not a gang initiation. These kids were just knuckleheads. They're just joyriding in other people's cars because it was fun.
Yeah.
But it kind of creates a lot of mayhem for people, so.
And that's 70% of what we're seeing.
That's what I believe.
And that's why we keep coming back and keep saying our young people, it has to be a collective thing as a community. We have to figure it out. And then when you're young, you do things, but, we want to give alternatives.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm just amazed by is the amount of drug abuse that goes on, not just in our town, but across the country, trying to figure out what it is about our culture, our society that is driving this desire for drugs. And I think the juvenile piece is a part of that, because these are people who are experimenting, they're trying to figure out who they're gonna be, and a lot of them are using, not a lot of the juvenile population, a lot of the population committing crimes are involved in drugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, I appreciate those questions. Yes, sir.
Chief, tell me about fentanyl.
Bad.
How often do y'all use, how many times last year did y'all use Narcan?
Off the top of my head, a half a dozen times. Maybe as many as 10. We do track that, so I don't have it off the top of my head, but we have a sergeant who tracks all that. We report to a national database.
Well, 10 people saved, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
And I've seen it work on TV, if y'all ever seen it, somebody just looks like they're about to die, they stick it up their nose and give them a few minutes and they wake up.
But now, can't you buy that across the counter, over the counter? They're encouraging people to do it over the counter, to help save lives. So it's not just public safety having to do it, not just drugstore.
Yeah, and Georgia has a law that is like a Good Samaritan law. So if you're with somebody and they use drugs and they need Narcan.
I'm thinking like, oh, I'm going to do some fentanyl, let me get my Narcan.
Well, the problem is with Narcan is that it's incredibly potent in very small doses. And so very few people are actively seeking fentanyl to abuse as the substance. What they're doing is abusing something else that has fentanyl mixed into it. And then the problem with all these unregulated drugs is you don't know how potent it's gonna be, how much fentanyl it has, but a little bit too much is lethal.
Yeah.
How many drug overdoses would you say we have a year in Statesboro?
Reported drug overdose, I really have, I'd be speculating so much, Council, I'd really like to come back with a number for you, because I really don't know that number.
Okay, we'll send it to all of us.
Please. Yes,
Yeah,
please.
and, you know, and I do want to say this right here. There are a lot of young people, that's using drugs and that's getting involved in things. And I think that, and Chief, if I'm wrong, correct me. I think every incident last year, every homicide last year, I think drugs had something to do with each one of those. Am I wrong in saying that?
No, you're absolutely correct. I would say to you, without going out too far on a limb, that all of our violent crime is being driven by drug use. Either in the purchase, the sale, violence related to those transactions, you know, where people get harmed, or committing crimes so that they can buy drugs. I would say literally all of them are.
Okay.
You have young people, old people, man, woman, black, white.
Mostly young people, you know, again, there is an age out. We once in a while find 50-year-old junkies, but generally speaking, people that are abusing drugs tend to be young. Now,
18 years
sometimes.
old, they using crack.
Crack is still around.
Yeah, it's still around.
Using it, right? We were finding, we had a homicide last weekend, and the drug of choice was lean, which is like heavy-duty cough syrup. They mix it with other, you know, Powerade or, you know, Kool-Aid, and then they sell it. And I'm asking people, like, why do you call it lean? And it's generally because it makes you nod off it, so people literally are leaning under the influence of it. And so, and that's the problem with chasing substances, right? People are gonna abuse something. What we have to figure out as a society is what's driving that desire.
Sociologists call it retreatism.
Yeah.
Retreatism. They're wanting to escape the reality that they're in. It's retreatism.
Yeah, whether that's numbing themselves or getting high so they can disassociate. There's something about American society, I'm sad to say that well, it's been happening not just this generation, but for since the 60s at least, where people are turning to drugs increasingly in order to check out. Just moving on real quick, I hate to dominate the whole time here. Our dispatch center last year handled all of those calls for service, 43,000 some calls for service. We've been planning for a couple of years to take on fire dispatch, so we've increased the dispatch center staffing, and so I'm happy to say that in January we were finally able to take on that role, and so we are dispatching for the fire department as well as the police department. And so far, I think Tim can say it's going pretty smooth. I know our dispatchers were really anxious about it, and it turned out to not be that big of a deal. So they were well trained, they were ready to go. They just needed to get their feet wet and figure it out.
So we're getting all of our dispatchers to be able to do PD and FD.
That's correct. That's right.
All of them, they'll all be in the same place?
Correct. So what's happened is that with staffing, we're having 3 or 4 dispatchers working at all times. So when a call comes in, one of them becomes a fire dispatcher for the time of that call. So they can give one person full service to the fire department and answer all their questions and needs, dispatch the trucks they need. Where before they just needed that level of service. I want to talk real quickly, I have 2 slides left. This is something that I'm referring to as precision policing, and this is that you guys have bought into. I'm happy to say both our FUSA system and our flock system. Our FUSA system, which is our video sharing program, we're in more than 40 different locations around the city, and we have access to more than 1,000 cameras in real time. And our flock system, we got a grant for about $500,000 last year that we can start putting flock systems in. We have about 32 of them in the ground right now, and 4 or 6 that we just got permits for from GDOT to put in the right of way, so that we can gather evidence of people driving by. We can put like a stolen car license plate into the system, and if it drives past one of those, the officers in their cars are getting notified that a stolen car just drove past one of them. Things, right? I think in two of last year's homicides were solved with leads that were originally generated through the flock system. Right? And as that system is growing out, it's just going to be more and more helpful for recovering stolen cars, finding wanted subjects, getting evidence after the fact. So I do have a quick video I'd like to show you, and it's from Cobb County. They're using both FUSIS and flock. I saw their video, and there's no way I could put something this good together, so I thought I'd just steal theirs and show it to you. I did ask them permission for sure. But it really kind of boils down to what this means by precision policing. One of the things I'd like you to keep in mind is that, you know, what's happening historically is that, you know, there'll be some crime, and people will call and say, hey, the suspect's left here in a white four-door sedan. And then the police would stop every white four-door sedan leaving that area, and, you know, people get hassled who have nothing to do with the crime, right? And if it's a violent crime, the officer's gonna be on heightened alert when they approach that car, and it's not really good for relationships either direction. With these systems, they're really helping us gather better information in real time so we can stop the correct car and not just every car. So I'm going to play our video for us here. That was the video. Don't listen to that part, you're not listening. So that's what we're trying to get to. We don't have a real-time crime center that's staffed with anybody, but what we're doing is the decentralized version. Every officer has access to all these SWAT cameras in their patrol cars and to all those video feeds. Dispatch also has access to all that information in dispatch. And so coordinating together, we're hoping to have a better response to incidents, more precise response, and a quicker response as well.
That's good. I like that.
Okay. All questions?
So there we asked a question about details. So Cindy, before she starts the next presentation, is going to answer your question.
Okay.
How many hotels we have in, Statesboro? She's going to share that, and she's going to get into, the utility, billing service.
Okay, thank you. Good work.
There are 17 hotels inside city limits. So we
17.
collect taxes on, yes.
17 motels inside the city limits that we collect taxes on.
Yes.
Thought it'd be more than that.
I thought it was less.
You thought it was less?
Yeah.
Thought it was more.
Well,
Sorry.
you got the exact number, 17.
Yeah.
Well, we got room for more.
Yeah.
Okay, so today I want to talk to you about our utility billing schedule and how we want to improve our customer service and make our utility bills easier for customers to understand, make it easier for our customer service reps to explain the customer service. So currently, when a customer receives their bill, it is for water used anywhere from 6 weeks to 2 months ago. So here's an example. Krista, our utility billing supervisor, billed on February the 8th and it was for service from November the 20th to December 20th. She pulled the information, she started the process for billing. By the time the customer received their bill, it's already 6 weeks later. Example 2 is when on February 19th, bills are processed, and it is for the months of October 28th through November 29th. That's approximately 2 months after a customer has used the water or gas. So our current system is, the way we bill it is a holdover from when meter readers used to have to go out and physically read the meters. They would bring that information back into City Hall. The utility building would have to key that information manually, and then the bills would be processed. So over the past few years, we have worked with, public utilities, have updated their software. The finance department, utility billing software has been updated. So now we're ready to move our billing schedule forward, bring it into the current century. It will take approximately 10 months to do this, and it will require an additional 5 days of service to be added to every customer's bill, so that we can get to the point where when they receive their bill, it'll be strictly for the previous month. Currently, customers are billed for 30 days, and it's not a rate increase, but it is an increase in service days. So the bill itself will increase. Again, it'll make it easier for customers to understand their bill. They can catch problems quickly that they may have, if they have leaks, water leaks, high gas usage. They don't remember why they had used so much gas. And if they have a running toilet or any kind of leaks or usage that they may have, that problem can be caught sooner and it doesn't drag on. So if they don't catch it for a couple months, they're already gonna get more bills compounded on this. So here is a schedule of how we are planning on doing this. March would be a normal bill. We want to get this information out to the customers, get them prepared on what we're doing, educate them, let them know. And it would actually start with the April billing when our Krista, our utility billing supervisor, runs the information. And you can see each month with 5 days would be added, so that by January 2025, a customer should receive a bill for the usage they had in December of 2024.
30 days.
30 days. So this is temporary, but it'll take about 10 months. I'll stay and see if anybody has any questions.
Wait, I'm a little confused.
Okay.
Okay, so they're being charged for service days? What do you mean? Like, break
The
it down
days of
in layman's
usage,
terms for
the
me.
usage that you use, so,
Okay,
when we currently bill, it is for the usage of water for 30 days.
okay.
It would go to the usage of water for 35 days.
So the deal, we're gonna collect for 5 extra days so we can catch up. And let me help Cindy out on this. When Cindy and Steve came to see me about this, all of a sudden I had a flashback. The reason I had this flashback is because when I got my utility bill, I looked at my utility bill and it was like $85. And I'm like, why is my bill $85? And so when they started talking, and I went back and I looked at it, it was for October when my sprinkler system was still running. So here we are in January, February, and I'm just getting that bill, when my bill should have probably been $60 versus $85. And so when they sat down and shared this, we're going back to an old system. The only way to catch up would be to charge everybody for 2 months, because my bill is 60 days behind. My bill is 60 days behind, because I still haven't gotten December, January. But most people would not be able to afford that. So what we're talking about doing, instead of saying, okay, we gotta catch you up and everybody's gotta pay for 2 months.
Mhm.
We use the water and the sewer and the gas. So what we're talking about is spreading that out, adding like 5 days to the bill through the next 10 months in
Mhm.
order to recoup that.
Yeah.
What happens now is our fiscal year ends on June 30th,
Mhm.
when we start the new fiscal year. We cannot close the books
Mhm.
on that fiscal year for 2 more months because we still have receivables, which are those 2 months of bills
Mhm.
that are still out. So therefore, two months after June 30th, we're still dealing in
Mhm.
2023. So this is to make real-time billing.
Mhm.
So when you get your bill from Georgia Power now, and flashback on it. When you get your bill from Georgia Power, it was for last month,
Mhm.
okay? And you pay it this month. When you get our bill, when I get my bill, I'm 60 days behind. So when a customer leaves, if they're on that same cycle that I'm on,
Mhm.
they get 2 more bills after they leave. And let me just simply say to you, we're putting us in jeopardy because if they don't pay that water bill, water and sewer bill, we then have to, go after them with collections. And the thing about a utility bill, it's an unsecured debt.
Mhm.
And so we might collect it or not, but by being able to catch these bills up, we really are being closer to the actual bill, the time that you use the resources,
Mhm.
and then you get billed for it like right now.
What
We're
I'm-
behind anyways, like, how do we get
It's,
behind?
It's
it's
a
because
whole
we used to
system.
manually read the meters.
Mhm.
We had
We used to
people
go
go
to
out
your
throughout
house and actually read
the
it.
whole city and actually read the meters.
It's not the landlords a lot, because when something breaks, you know, we have to fix it, and the
Mhm.
tenants don't know, you know, what this was fixed, well, I just got a bill 2 months ago, it's like
And it
confusion.
would end up saving customers money if they do have any issues like that, because it can be called a lot sooner and they realize it.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking those high months of usage, the summertime, early fall, they're not getting those bills until when they gotta kick money out, Thanksgiving, Christmas, things of that nature. So by us putting it on track, it allows us to let them pay it in real time, and then those extra higher bills are not coming during a time period where money's going out the door anyway. Yeah.
So the next slide which shows an average increase based on the customer type. If the customer is a residential customer with only water and sewer, and we go from 30 days to 35 days, they're looking at approximately $6.11 increase. Of course, it depends on the resident, how they use the water, you know, how much water they use in that time period. If it is a water, sewer, and gas customer, they're looking at approximately $23. A commercial water sewer, 12, a commercial water sewer gas, 293. The average government bill, this is actually one of the higher usage ones, that's a 523. And then industrial water only, the gas and sewer for the industrial customers are already on the schedule that we want to go to. They're already on a 30-day cycle, for the previous month. And so theirs would only increase about $18 a month. So they're currently caught up. They're getting billed for the previous month already.
So after the 10 months, does it go back down to $75?
It would go back down to the 30 days, yes.
Okay.
So this is for this 10 months that the residents, the customer would see the increase, and then it would go back down to their normal usage.
But it doesn't average out to what they would pay for a whole year. By itself.
Yeah, but we're not charging anybody any extra,
Mhm.
No,
giving nobody no breaks, this is what you have.
Right.
This average industrial water bill,
Yes,
we have people that pay 50,000 a month.
yes, yes.
It's a big user.
Thank you.
Any questions, because we do have a press release
I printed some copies, I wasn't sure based on feedback and,
Share these press releases with you.
And this would start in April again to get it out to our residents, that this is coming, let them know, website, social media, in their bills themselves.
But before we did this, we wanted to make sure y'all understood. Because we could have done it, then next thing y'all was gonna get a call, and that would have been a good thing.
Thank you.
So it makes sense to me, when will I, can I expect the first phone call of somebody?
Well,
It may be
April, well, maybe tomorrow after this, after his press, they won't actually see the first bill until the bill in April.
Okay.
Yeah, but if y'all okay, we need to do this.
Okay.
Until then, don't fuss at me, you're not in my district.
I'm in field. Okay?
Thank you, sir.
So the next item that we are, have been working in customer service is our online bill payment. We've been in discussion with our bank for about a year now. They did a pilot program in September. So what this is if you go into your bank account and you select pay a bill, you think that the company that you are paying is receiving that money immediately. They're not. They are getting a physical check. If we have customers that go into their bank account, they write a check, they think we get it immediately, they get a late charge, they're calling us, I paid my bill, the bank took it out of my account, we didn't receive, but we receive a physical check, and it takes 2 or 3 days to actually get that check. So currently, like I said, we have been working with a bank, and they have came up with a program, and what'll happen is the customer will go into their bank account, pay their bill, and we will get it electronically. So usually it'll be like the next day. So instead of having 2 or 3 days lag, or waiting on the post office and the mail, we would get it electronically the next day. So I've had several conversations with customers, asking, or telling me, I did it, I went into my bank account, the bank took the money, but we didn't get the money. Because of it having to go through the bank, through the mail, the bank issuing the actual physical check. A couple of weeks ago, we actually got
Wait,
checks like
I'm
that.
sorry, if I'm catching on slow, so. They would pay their bill via the bank?
They would go into their bank account, like if you go into your bank account,
Okay.
you should have an option that you can pay a bill from your checking account, and in their terms, it's the electronic check. And what would happen is, they would take everybody that did that day and write one check to us.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of customers think that we're getting the money immediately, and we're not.
Okay.
And by partnering with Synovus, and they putting this program in place, that'll eliminate that.
That's good,
Yeah, it is,
cause I would be pissed off too if I took the money out of my account, they would still pay, now I'm getting late.
yeah,
Yes.
believe me,
I had a few.
we've had to explain this to some well-meaning people, and they thought the bill was being paid the day, and I had to tell one person that they mailed us a check, and they mailed it on the day that you told them to mail it, but it was 3 days late. So you either gotta back it up and give them an earlier date so you don't get a late fee. But this way, it's done electronically and we don't have to worry about it. We just wanted y'all to be aware. We're stepping into the 21st century, here we come. Mayor and council, thank y'all, and again, that last one was a tough one. Because a lot of times when we talk about stuff, we want to blame somebody. And so, in just that case with the utility bill, it's not a matter of blaming anyone. It's just simply understanding, that we're transitioning, and yeah, it could have been done many years ago, but we're doing it today.
Yeah.
And so we're not blaming anybody, we're playing some catch up. Okay? So we'd like to call on Richard Gill to present our, annual financial audit. Hey, Richard.
Good afternoon.
How you doing?
Good.
All right.
First of all, just want to thank the city council for allowing our firm to handle the annual audit for the city. And want to thank Cindy and her staff for providing all the information that we need to do the audit. I think y'all have a copy of the audit.
We do.
And we have a PowerPoint. I just want to try to hit some highlights on page 14 of the the audit. Yeah, page 14 is the statement of net position. Just to point out a couple things. The total assets for the city were $204,037,000. That was an increase in total assets of about 19.2 million, 10% increase in total assets. The city's liabilities were about 57.8 million, which was about 14.6, or 34% increase. And in those liabilities, some of the main liabilities for the city, see the unearned revenue for the ARPA was 10.9 million. Is considered unearned until you actually spend the ARPA funds. Your OPEB liability was 6.9 million, which was about a million, 17% increase. The net pension liability was 15.3 million, which is a pretty big number. It increased by about 9.3 million from the prior year. Total revenue bonds payable to current and the long-term portion was 16,895,000. The revenue bonds actually decreased about 1.3 million, or 7%. Your total net position for the city was 148,768,000. Your total net position increased almost 14.1 million, about 10% increase in your total net position. Of that net position, 95.3 million, 64% is invested in capital assets net of related debt. And the unrestricted portion of the net position was 17.5 million.
Mr. Deal, what is OPEB, OPEB liability?
Excuse me?
OPEB liability, what does that stand for? OPEB.
Other post-employment benefits, it would be for like insurance that's paid for employees that retire, that y'all have promised to pay their insurance until they start getting, Medicare. Pretty big number, and the pension liability is a big number too. You look on page 15, your total expenses for governmental activities were 29.3 million, which was about 4,961,000, a 20% increase. Your total revenues for the governmental activities, which would be in those next three columns, plus the general revenues down below. Total revenues for the governmental activities were 38.6 million, which was about 4.9, a 13% increase. Included in that revenue, you recognize ARPA revenue of over $1 million for the year. T-SPLOST revenue for the year was $7,144,000. SPLOST revenue $7,170,000. Investment earnings, with the increase in interest rates, with cash on hand for the city, you earn investment earnings of $1,729,000, which is great. On page 16 is the governmental funds, the first fund being the general fund. You see that, total assets were $7,983,000 for the general fund, which was about a $724,000 or 8% decrease. Your fund balance for the general fund was $6.9 million. Fund balance actually decreased about $1,010,000 or 13%. If you look on page 17 page 18 for the general fund, you can see total revenues of $15,598,000, which general fund revenues increased about $2,173,000 or 16%. Expenditures were $16,882,000, which was about $1,429,000 or 9% increase. Your ending fund balance again for the general fund being $6,933,000. That represents about 35% of your annual expenditures, transfers out. For rule of thumb, you want that at least to be 33%. So you kind of went into your fund balance a little bit the last couple of years. The SPOS fund balance at the end of the year was $2,708,000. The 2019 SPOS was $13,895,000. The SPOS revenues again for the year were $7,683,000. The T-SPOS had a fund balance of $16,908,000, and it had total revenues of $7,702,000. On the proprietary funds, on page 24 and 25, is the proprietary funds. And if you look at those in total for the enterprise funds, they had a total net position there on page 24 of $76,178,000, which was an increase of $4,771,000 or 7%. Page 25, you see the total revenues for the enterprise funds was $26,236,000. Slight increase there, about $289,000. Total expenses were $22,647,000, which is about an $851,000 or 4% increase. Your total operating income for all the enterprise funds was $3,590,000, which was about $563,000, 14% decrease. And then your total transfers to governmental activities from the enterprise funds were $4,033,000. And then on the internal service funds, they had a net position of $779,000, most of that being the health insurance fund. They had a net position of $756,000, which is a $372,000 increase. The fleet management had a net position of zero, it zeroed out for the year. So that's kind of a quick highlight of some of the numbers in the financials. We'll be glad to answer any questions anyone might have.
Council, any questions?
So generally, we're still in good shape, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
That's what we want to hear.
He usually says that.
Yeah.
Richard will be here for the regular meeting to present the audit for you to officially, accept the audit. So that's one of the first items on the agenda.
Yeah, I didn't realize I've got another meeting in Claxton for their council meeting, but I've already told them I can come a little late. But all right. I'll keep that one. Even
Thank you, Mr. Gill.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Penny?
Ms. Caldwell, Kathy, did you want to say anything before Caleb, or?
No, just that, we held a public hearing to get some input on this issue. And, Caleb will summarize the, results of that hearing, as part of the PowerPoint presentation. But you did ask us to hold the hearing and then come back and report to you, with a proposed ordinance. So that's what we're here for.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
How you doing, Caleb?
Thank you, Ms. Field. Thank you, Mr. Penny, and thank you very much, Mayor and Council. I'm Caleb Rossico with TSW. Good to see everyone again. And I wanted to walk very briefly through the proposed legislation under consideration before we talk about the comments. As Kathy mentioned, and as many of you are aware, several months ago, we were asked to help the city of Statesboro create standards for regulating scooters. And this really relates to things like scooters, skateboards, hoverboards, segways, but does not relate to any medical device. So as we talk about everything today, just keep in mind that if it's a medical device that your doctor needs you to have or that you need for mobility, it would not be regulated at all by anything before us for consideration this evening. Also a little bit of a reminder, after much discussion with staff, including the police department, we decided to propose really two ways to regulate these devices within the city of Statesboro. The first part was to develop a set of citywide standards that applies to everyone who has a device, regardless of whether it is a personal device or one operated by a company, and then come up with very specific standards for what companies doing business in the city of Statesboro want to do. And as a reminder, the reason we did that is because we don't believe the police chief and the police department should have to determine who owns the vehicle before determining whether it's breaking the law. So the operations will be the exact same regardless of who owns it. And very importantly, most of what we've done here is just take what is already in the state of Georgia code, especially Title 40, which relates to motor vehicles in the state of Georgia. So the first part of the legislation, again, directly from Georgia code, is to amend your current standards for Chapter 78 to state what is in the Georgia law. So we would develop standards for roller skates that are currently called roller skates and skateboards. We would rename them to non-motorized vehicles and specify that they're really prohibited anywhere in a public right-of-way as is current procedures, although they are allowed on sidewalks and trails, except as prohibited by mayor and council. So what that basically means is that if you're a young kid, you can roller skate down the sidewalk, but the city has the authority to say, well, we don't think you should do it here, or we're having a special event and we just don't want anyone to do that in those particular areas. Again, as Georgia law allows us to. The second part of the code would be to incorporate reference to the state of Georgia definitions and standards for bicycles, which, as everyone may or may not be aware, generally speaking, you can ride them on any public street. You do not have to have a helmet, although a helmet is encouraged. And the only people who can ride them on a sidewalk are children, I believe, age 12 or younger. So again, this is state of Georgia code. We're not changing anything for Statesboro. We're just referencing those particular standards.
You mean a grown-up can ride that on the street?
That is not a bicycle. No.
Okay, I apologize, okay.
So that is a new definition. The councilman was pointing to what are basically, we think of as scooters. We would define these in your local code. This is based on some legislation from the state level. Basically define them as a vehicle less than 100 pounds in weight, has handlebars and a motor, powered by either electricity or propulsion. So you can imagine the one you just showed, the little kid is pushing it with his feet. He doesn't actually have a motor on it, and cannot exceed 20 miles an hour. So we would define what those are, again, based on the Georgia standards, and then we would develop a series of regulations for them, or incorporate a series of regulations for them, again, based on what the state says. Effectively, what that is you can only use them on a street with a speed limit of 35 miles an hour or less. You could only use them on bike lanes or bike lanes regardless of the speed of the road. You can use them on sidewalks if the road is higher than 35 miles an hour. But there's a really important caveat here that, in my opinion, means that they can't be used on most sidewalks in Statesboro. And that is that the sidewalk has to be more than 5 feet. And once you get out of downtown, your sidewalks are generally not that wide. So effectively, the current state procedures that we would incorporate here do not allow people to ride scooters on sidewalks in most of the city. So I thought that was a very important distinction, again, to remind council of. And then finally, the legislation would incorporate a series of just sort of, again, best practices that align with state law. Basically treat them like vehicles, so no drunk scooter driving. You gotta obey traffic rules when you're in the roadway. Encouraged to wear a helmet, but again, not required. And gives a provision in there for the city of Statesboro to add anything that they may think is important going forward, as if a certain position or situation arises, the city can certainly update that. But not a lot of new content. Again, this is mostly from the state. So those would be the laws that the police department can enforce regardless. The second piece of legislation under discussion would actually be a contractual relationship between the city of Statesboro and the companies that come to the city and try to rent these things out in the public right of way. And we're calling these shareable devices. And they're targeted at scooters. We know Lime was here up until GSU kicked them off campus relatively recently. But this could also be used, for example, if you had someone who wanted to rent bicycles in the public right of way, or any of these other devices. So we're not calling it scooter specific, we're calling it shareable. So the proposed provisions are really put in place to protect the city and to protect the users of the device. They do that in several ways. They require permitting, and the fees would be subject to determination by this body. They require a business license and a license to be a shareable device. There would be very high insurance provisions, and the city would be protected from any liability claims associated with that. There would be annual fees. There would be a numeric limit of potentially 50 is what we put in the first draft, but the city can certainly determine whatever is the final number. And very importantly, there's a whole series of standards about what the companies have to do before they let people operate. So they have to notify them of the city's rules about operating them. They have to notify them about the hours of operation. They have to make sure that they're doing everything effectively that the city requires. The operators have to do that. There would also be reporting standards, and you may recall from my previous presentation that Councilman Riggs, had you asked about crash data in City of Atlanta? So there was a question about crash data, and so what they do in other jurisdictions is they prepare a quarterly report to the local government. They look at the crash data. The good thing, I don't know if you were at that council meeting, but the good news is when we did share that, there was very little crash data. It was, generally speaking, very late night activity, really associated with more conditions in the roadway than operators. So from Atlanta's perspective, it wasn't a big concern. They felt that the standards which we've incorporated into Statesboro's proposed code was appropriate. So all of that would be in there. And finally, there would be a termination agreement that would give the council and mayor the right to break an agreement if it's not working. Additionally, let's see here, my iPad shut off and I don't have everything fully memorized. Additionally, there would be a amendment to chapter 70 to incorporate everything that I've just talked about. Again, could be generally based on a model from Brookhaven that we've used, updated based on some of the previous discussions. And as I mentioned before, the things like fees, number, etc., that's all up to the legislative body to decide. We have no opinion on that. We would recommend that you do whatever is appropriate for the city. Additionally, we did find a couple of, there has been a draft that has been shared with you. We did find a couple of Scrivener's errors that we would recommend the city update based on what I presented. The first one would be to just reference the citywide speed limit for the vehicles. That was not in the draft that I shared you, but I can certainly share a revised version with staff. And then we would just want to take out the stuff about sidewalks and trails because all of that is in another code section. So this particular proposal was the proposal that was shared with the public at the meeting that Ms. Fields mentioned, January 23rd. We had about how many folks, Kathy?
At least 25.
About 25 folks come, and they were very good range of constituency, in my opinion. Generally speaking, the folks who spoke were very supportive of the standards that I talked about for the personal devices. It's really just common sense provisions. We had no opposition to those. There were some folks who did not, one person who did not like the idea of having the shareable scooters anywhere in the city. Again, that's a policy decision. There were two folks who spoke in support of the shareable, and then there were a lot of more detailed comments. Some of the comments related to, some of the comments related to operations. We had 6 comments related to operations. They wanted to know how the police department would enforce things like DUI. They wanted to know the impact on the police department and other city staff. I believe Ms. Fields and Mr. Penny answered those to the satisfaction of the individuals. There were several people who asked about parking, where these things can go. And again, I believe the draft proposal is very clear. You can't park them in the sidewalk. You can't park them in private property. Your arrangements with the operators would determine where they can go. There was a comment about whether parking could be tied to some sort of GPS positioning system. You really can't do that because it's not precise. If there's a location on a sidewalk and it's a foot over the line, a satellite really can't pick up that level of nuance. So there would be some enforcement. Additionally, people asked about lights and bells. There is a lighting requirement in the ordinance. Concerns about riding on sidewalk. One of the speakers wanted to require a helmet regardless of age. One of them asked about a potential exclusions zone if GSU doesn't want to allow them. Again, they're a state agency, that's their prerogative, with the exception of city rights of way through there, which would be up to the city to determine. And then two final comments. One were about whether this would impact the transit system. As a planner, I think they're completely different users for the most part. And then finally, whether they should be limited to 15 miles an hour when cars can go 25 to 35 miles an hour. And again, based on the data from Atlanta, which also uses 15, really isn't a problem. They're not riding in the middle of the roadway. They tend to be riding on the side. So generally speaking, we did get favorable support. We didn't see anything in our minds as TSW and staff that warrants a significant modification to the previous proposal. But I would love to answer any questions that you may have about that.
Thank you, Caleb. Council, any questions?
None? Okay.
So if there's no questions, then what we would be planning is to bring forward an ordinance to the council for your consideration. And
2 readings?
Yes, 2 readings, but I think probably not during the month probably in April. Because you got retreat and everything in March, and we're not, it'd be sort of hard to do a work session right after the retreat, so probably do it at the, introduce it at the second meeting in April, for the second reading in the first meeting in May.
Okay,
Okay? If that's okay with you.
sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Okay, so, next up, Mr. King.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council.
How you doing, Kate?
Doing well, how are y'all?
All right.
Well, back when we talked about the proximity issues with, downtown, essentially, we have, proximity requirements for home premise licenses, which are entirely a local government decision. What we don't allow is licenses to be issued with, poor licenses to be issued within 100 yards of churches or educational facilities. However, under current, code of ordinances, council may grant proximity waivers for restaurants, pubs, and low volume establishments that are in these prohibited 100-yard halos. But local regulation makes it impossible to have, bars and kitchens throughout a significant portion of downtown Statesboro due to the number of churches and educational facilities in our central business district.
Can you recall of any waivers that we granted?
Yeah, y'all granted a waiver for, what's the name of that? Poorhouse. Pub waiver was granted there.
That's the last.
Last meeting, and y'all also granted a pub waiver for Vino on West Main as well. So those do happen, but like I said, those are only for low volume restaurants and pubs. So the bars and kitchens, so any business that derives more than, I believe it's 40% of their revenue, or more than 60% of their revenue from alcohol would not be allowed there. So we can't bring these forward to y'all because we can't even bring them forward to y'all because the proximity waivers are not available. So we have to just tell applicants that no, over with or something. Because there's no mechanism of our code of ordinances that allows those applications to move forward, which is a major detriment to downtown development. So potential council options would be to eliminate this prohibition in all or a delineated part of the CBD or within the open container zone or whatever bounds y'all will have on that. Allow kitchens to consider proximity waivers for bars and kitchens in the entirety of the CBD, or to leave the ordinance as it currently stands. So one question that was brought up in that last one is, what does it look like? And so the two at the top, the two to the north, it's on typical north, south, east, west orientation. To the north are First Baptist Church as well as First Baptist Korean Mission. Down at the bottom left, to the southwest, that's going to be First Methodist Church. Just to the northeast of it is North Southern Big Campus. And then directly to the east of that is the Spirit and Truth Worship Center. You can see where Big is. That is east-west Main that goes there. And then north-south Main is one that picks up the halos for First Baptist and First Methodist. So